You must be careful about the words you use, or the words you allow to be used in your house. Words are things. You must be careful. Careful about calling people out of their names, using racial pejoratives and sexual pejoratives and all that ignorance. Don't do that.
It's time to talk about it.
Pull up a chair and take a seat.
We're serving up recipes for life.
With Hampton University's Dr. Richard Mason and Dr. Tamara Williams.
Welcome to the Sunday Brunch.
This is Dr. Tamara Williams.
And this is Dr. Richard Mason. Welcome back to the table for another edition of Sunday Brunch with the Good Doctors.
The good doctor. The good doctor.
Yes. It's always good to be back at the table with you. How's everything going?
It's been a week, bro. It's been a week. So I'm glad to be back at the table. I always look forward to our conversations. It doesn't matter what's happening during the week. I know come Sunday brunch time, we're going to have a good time. We're going to have a good time.
Listen, I tell you.
And we're going to eat well.
Hey, look, that's the other part. That is the other part. We might need to do workout with the Good Doctors because I tell you, I'm just...
We already did a little yoga before. Who knows? We might need to have that conversation. It's more than just mental health, physical health. If you don't have your physical health.
Exactly.
Those things still go together. So no doubt.
Yeah. And look,
As
I
we
said I'm going
say,
to be one of those people that wait till the first of the year and just, have that New Year's resolution that I'm going to get back in the gym.
No. You know we don't teach people that mess. A body in motion stays in motion, and a body at rest stays in rest. People who wait till the beginning of the year to set their resolutions, they don't ever get them done. You just start. People procrastinate.
That's easier said than done. That's all I'm saying.
No one ever said it was going to be easy. We never said it was going to be easy. We just say it's going to be worth it. It's going to be worth it. Easy is not even... I don't know the last time I've heard that word.
Right, exactly.
It seems like I like things the hard way because I can't imagine the last time I have heard, let me take the easy route. So no. Working out is hard work. I don't enjoy it. A lot of things that we have to do are not necessarily enjoyable. We do what we have to until we can do what we want to.
Yeah, I remember a time I used to get up and I used to run 3 miles every morning.
When was that?
Listen, that's my point. When this knee started giving me trouble, that kind of stopped. I mean, nowadays, if you see me running, somebody chasing me,
Okay, understand that. I did my 1 year in the Navy Reserves, and I prayed to the Lord, the sweet baby Jesus, if he helped me get through the type of training with the Marines that they had me going through, I promised him that even if a dog was chasing me, we would have to stop and have a conversation about it. There would be no more running.
Exactly. and honestly, that's where I am now. If a dog dare jump out and gonna chase me, I think he's gonna have a problem because that fight, flight, or freeze. No, we're gonna fight. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Flight and running is not in the vocabulary, and I ain't gonna stand still for you to bite me. So we certainly gonna fight.
Yeah, I'm definitely not running. My knees have said that's a wrap. I'm not running. But I will stop to have a conversation. I will duck and move. But whatever. We could talk about this all day long about how we respond to trauma in situations. But we definitely need to get in our conversation today. I'm so excited. Excited about the conversation that we're going to have today. One, because at this table, we're lifelong learners.
Yes.
So we love all things education. So we get excited when we get to have conversations about education topics. So I'm really excited about this conversation. And in lieu of all the things that are happening in our world right now, I think that is a very relevant conversation. There's a lot of people that often don't feel seen. There's a lot of people that often don't feel heard. There's a lot of people that in education, we've been able to see it as an avenue to transition and open doors for you. But there's some people who aren't introduced to education that way. So it's so
Right.
nice to have a conversation with someone who's interested in having those difficult conversations about classrooms and things that happen in
Exactly.
classrooms.
And we don't mind having those discussions right here at the table. So
We don't bring it
exactly.
on. Bring it. Well,
Yeah.
we
So
know
you go
better.
ahead
We
and
do
get us
better.
started. Yeah. So you go ahead and get us started. I'm gonna head on to the buffet. You know, and I see what's coming on out there. So I'm gonna head on over to the buffet right now. Because see, I heard they got this new little French toast that I'm gonna try. So I know you want your biscuits and your honey butter, but I'm gonna bring you a piece of that French toast too.
I'm not turning down the French toast. And bring some bacon back with you too.
Oh, of
Of
course, that's a
of the
given.
real
That's a
kind.
given.
Yes,
The
yes,
real bacon.
yes.
All right, because what I say, turkey ain't meant to be no bacon. That's not holy. It's not of God. All right.
We're
Amen,
not call,
somebody.
we're not calling we don't call turkey bacon at this table. Nor do we call
Exactly.
it sausage.
No, not at all.
Nor do we call it those two things. But back to our topic. I want to welcome to the Sunday brunch table. I want to welcome for the first time and most likely not the last time, Dr. Marley Bunch. Dr. Marley Bunch is an educator, and we're going to have a great conversation with her this evening about, well, I should say brunch time this afternoon. We're going to have a great conversation with her this afternoon about how she got into education and what she specifically brings to the table. Because I love what she's bringing to the table right now, this energy that she's bringing to the table. So let's talk about it.
Mhm.
Welcome
Yes,
to
welcome.
Sunday Brunch.
Thank you
Welcome.
both for having me. I'm excited to be here with you all.
Yes,
Good,
welcome to your
good.
home by the sea. May just become your home by the sea.
Someday it could.
Hey,
All right, all right.
and we got to see the places we're gonna be first. So it's welcome to welcome.
hmm
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so
So
tell us
tell
a
us,
little. Go ahead, go ahead. I'm gonna eat. Go ahead. You can
you
start talking.
tell us, Dr. Bunch. Tell us. Um, I read a little bit about your book that we'll get to very shortly. And so, even though I said you're an educator, you didn't always think that you wanted to be in education. So, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you actually became a teacher.
Yeah. So, my history of my own education is pretty interesting. I went to a really, really diverse elementary and middle school. And then when I
hmm
got to high school, the neighborhood that I lived in, I would have went to a school. I guess we've labeled them. At the time, it was called, a dropout factory, and it has since closed.
hmm
So my grandmother spent her life savings to send me to a private school about 45 minutes from where we lived, and
hmm
I got a good education. But it really, I think the social shock of it temporarily killed my love of learning. So high school for me was
mm
not it. It was not it. I didn't
mm
learn about anything that felt relevant or connected to my history. I didn't see teachers that looked like me. I didn't see classmates that looked like me. Um, it was in a socioeconomic bracket that was not mine. Um, and so I went there on a scholarship, and by the second semester of my freshman year, I had lost that scholarship. So my grades went from straight
mm
A's to C's and D's really quickly, and
hmm
nobody noticed. I think I was just that scholarship kid that they were like, whatever. So I reluctantly went to college in Evanston, Illinois, at a teaching college called National Louis University, a little tiny
mm
private school. And I loved it. And it was exactly
mm
what I needed. So, college, I always say, saved my curiosity and love of learning. I started out as a psychology major. I don't think I knew what I wanted to do, but I was really interested in learning about behaviors and how the brain
hmm
worked and social interaction. So, psychology was it. And I was about two classes away from finishing. And I was like, can I listen to people's problems for my whole career? And so I was like, no, I don't think I can. So I pivoted.
Listen, we do this for a living, and that's the
Right.
reason why we don't do just that ourselves.
That's right.
That's right.
That's
I was like,
right.
I don't think I could do this. So I
hmm
switched to English literature. So I basically double majored in English literature and psychology. And then right
Mm-hmm.
after my bachelor's, I went to DePaul University where I got my first master's in education.
Mm-hmm.
Had
Let me
another.
ask you a question real quick. I hate to interrupt you, but that whole English lit thing just kind of threw me for a minute. You know, how do you go from psychology straight to English lit? It's like, mm,
Hmm.
mm,
I think I have a artsy side. I had always loved reading and writing, and so
mm-hmm,
like literature made sense to me. I was always interested in the seminars that they had, and I'd seen the courses as I was in my psych program. I was like, let me switch. So it was interesting to
mm-hmm.
practice both sides of the brain and be in that program. It
Okay,
is.
and that's what I was
It's gonna make sense real soon, bro. It's gonna make real
saying.
sense because
Well,
in her book, she really brings in a lot of the historical aspects. And
mm-hmm,
so she wants to teach children through history when other people are trying to remove our history from the book.
mm-hmm.
She's really trying to connect them through
Okay,
history and historical ways of teaching. So the
all
English
right.
literature part played a part in how she's developed as to who she
All
is.
right, all right. I see how you're trying
Mhm.
to make it make sense, because
Yeah,
otherwise I'm
yeah.
sitting there thinking to
It
myself,
makes sense.
I
I
don't know.
know.
I'd rather listen to people problems than English lit. So, but I
Oh, that's funny.
no offense to my English majors out there, all right?
Okay. But, it speaks to being able to combine your loves and,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm,
and, and your gifts. Mhm.
mm-hmm. Hence why we sit and talk to people and eat, okay? Because I love to eat.
See, combining your gifts. Yes, indeed. So here you are, Marley. You're out there and you're taking these English literature classes, and then you get your first master's. You said in education.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
How did you get to education? How did it become? Is it because of the school that you came from was a teaching college that they were like really
That's a
advocating for teachers, or?
That's a good question. I think that was where I met my first mentor. Her name was Dr. Joyce Markle. She was a white woman, but she was so good at understanding what her students needed, even if they weren't from backgrounds like hers, which was really cool. And she was like, "You need to go get your master's." And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
"Really?" She was like, "You would be a phenomenal educator." And it was like, wow. But I think I
Mm.
listened to it because I had never in high school didn't have that. So that resonated. And so I
Mm-hmm.
looked at what that meant. And then I was like, you know what? Yeah. Because what am I going to do with an English degree? To your point, Dr.
Mm-hmm.
Do
Mm-hmm.
with the English
Yeah.
degree. And
See,
so
you
I
thought
thought,
it
I'm
too.
going to go be the teacher that I never had. That's what I'm going to
Mm.
do. And that's what
Hmm.
Okay, so
That is
how many
interesting.
years have you been teaching then?
Ooh, so 18 years,
Mm-hmm.
primarily in the secondary classrooms, but also some college, a little bit of middle school. So I've had
Mm.
a really good experience as far as like across different ages, different disciplines. My students really are the reason I think I just kept going to college. If I couldn't
Mm-hmm.
understand something I needed to know to help them learn better. It was like, oh, let me
Mm-hmm.
go get I don't know gifted education, but I happened to work at a Title I school with a lot of Black and Brown gifted kids. And I was like, how do I serve them? Let me go get a
Mm-hmm.
master's in gifted ed. So I got a second master's in gifted education. Then I found myself having a lot of ELL learners, English as a second language. So I got
Mm-hmm.
a certification in that. So they really kind of inspired me to just, I think, be the best educator that I could be and reach their needs as best I could through my own education.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, what I'm hearing, two things. One, you were able to turn a negative situation where you didn't feel like you had
Mm,
quality teachers or someone who really inspired that love of learning when you were in school. But then
mhm.
also, while you were in the profession, that inspiration continued from a different lens, whereby you wanted to support those kids and be
Yeah,
there for them in ways that they needed you to be there for them.
yeah,
Because for you to say, hey, listen, I'm working in this school division where we have these intelligent and gifted Black and
mm,
brown kids. let me go provide them a resource or be a better resource to them, you
Yeah,
know, than I currently am, because I have some skills, but I certainly could brush up on some things and add a few more things into my bag.
that's right.
So
Yeah,
yeah, kudos to you for that.
The
thank you.
best research answers the questions that we're interested in having answered. So that
Hmm.
I think that's the exciting part too, that you seem to be a lifelong learner, and then you're an educator, and then you have the service aspect that kind of drives why
Hmm.
you do what you do. And so
Hmm.
you
Yeah.
want to learn more if you're actually trying to help people. If you want it to
Right.
work, you want to learn so that you could be
Hmm.
of assistance. So I think that's amazing. But not only are you learning, but you want to teach others and you want to share what you've learned.
Hmm.
Yeah. Because let's be honest, I don't know that all teachers, that part to me was interesting, being in different districts and seeing the ways that teachers interacted with students and a lot of the
Hmm.
misconceptions I think that they had about students. And so I could see myself. Um, and very much knew that when I was in school, there were lots and lots of misconceptions, I think, about me. And so I always worked to be the teacher that didn't sit in the lunchroom and listen to the, typecasting of kids. I just wanted to find out for myself and tried to hold up a mirror and kind of show them the best version of themselves. But yeah, my students are
Hmm.
they really inspired me. I think they still inspire me. And, they're all adults now. But yeah.
Hmm. Well, I was just having this conversation. As a matter of fact, I think I mentioned it last week at the table when we were talking. I feel like teaching truly is a calling.
Mm,
It's truly a ministry in terms of that, because there are folks who can teach, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they should teach. There's a difference in terms of being qualified, but a good friend of mine, we talk about being qualified versus bona fide. And bona fide truly gets into, the essence, and the true essence. Just because you can doesn't mean that you should,
Mm-hmm.
and that's where the bona fide piece comes into play. And students can feel it. Like, I'm sure there were teachers in your walk growing up that they were qualified to teach, because obviously they were in the building, they had a license, they were teaching. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they were bona fide and should have been teaching, because
mm,
they may not have been called to teach. And over the years, I will say I've had some teachers that um, may not have been bona fide, but I really did have some good educators, some outstanding educators from, excuse me, elementary school all the way to high school and college, who I feel like were truly, truly bona fide. And I'm fortunate. I reconnected several years ago with my fifth grade teacher, Miss Janice Adams, and I'll tell you, she was one of true. When you talk about a bona fide teacher, absolutely bona fide, and worked under the administration of a bona fide principal, Dr. Robert Siegel. And I'll tell you, they truly set a solid foundation for me, just in terms of having that love of education. So it's kind of disheartening when I hear stories like yours that say, hey, I didn't have anyone in that process that really pushed me to that place of really wanting to learn, and have that thirst for knowledge, that thirst for reading, because I was truly blessed to have that right out the gate in elementary school.
mm. That's so good. I got it in college though. So it happened. It
Mm-hmm.
happened. I had some.
You were saying, Marley, that you didn't feel like they perceived you correctly when you were in school, and there was misperceptions of you. How did you think that you were perceived versus how you wanted
Mm,
to be perceived, or how you think you should have been perceived?
that's a good question. I think they saw a young, poor kid on a scholarship, a black woman or black young person, and thought, oh, well, I don't think there was any idea how curious I was, how much I loved learning. And so even in the classes where I naturally excelled, like literature and writing, um, when those grades started to slip, that's when I knew. I remember, however old you are at
Mm-hmm.
ninth grade, what, 14? But I remember the moment. in an English class, I was like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
they don't think I'm capable. And
Mm.
that I think was like the moment where it was like, well, I'm just not I'm going to give them what they expect. I remember, it wasn't that profound at 14, but I remember in my head thinking like, if that's what they
If
expect,
they don't expect much from me, then I'm not going to give them much.
then I'll just
They
be,
don't. They don't care, and I'll just be here.
I'll just be.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't cause, I wasn't a behavior disruption or anything like that. I just academically stopped performing because I thought,
Mm-hmm.
wow, if they don't even see it in me, if they don't have any interest or connection to say, hey, where'd your A's go? Or why have you been absent from school? So, nothing. So it was
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, well, I'll just not perform. So
Mm-hmm.
I just sat and observed and I wasn't engaged in the learning until I got to college. And then I had
How did you get to college from like I tapped out, I'm kind of not here, to here I am?
yeah, I was lucky that I had family say, go try. Like went to
Mm-hmm.
Chicago and it was like, what am I going to do? Well, let
Mm-hmm.
me let me just apply. So I applied to Loyola, I applied to all these different colleges and got into National Louis. Couldn't get into the other ones at that time because my high school GPA was a hot mess. And
Mm-hmm.
I thrived at this little, I don't know that people know that school unless you're from Illinois, but
Mm-hmm.
it was small. I got a lot of one-on-one attention. I took the coolest class, like Greek mythology and a whole seminar about Zora Neale Hurston. And so I think literature, I found Black history in a way that I had never seen it. And so that for me was like, yes.
Was that like your first introduction into like our Black work?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, okay,
Oh,
gotcha.
it was
Mm-hmm.
Eurocentric everything at the high school that I was everything. History classes, everything. And so it was like, okay. So for
Mm-hmm.
me, the literature, I think, opened up this world that led to other connections to history and I mean, all the things that I think I had wanted all along, but I was too young to be like, I'm not getting what I need academically
Mm-hmm.
and with the curricula. But now as an educator, I know that's what was absent.
Well,
The inability to see yourself in the narrative.
Yeah, we say representation matters and it and
mm-hmm.
it and it matters so much. And when I think back on my own story and my own positionality, absolutely that lack of representation had an impact.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Let me
When
ask
you
you
got
this.
the clout, go ahead.
No, let me ask you this because the representation piece is important because they talk about in terms, especially with Black boys, that Black boys learn differently, just in terms of some are more kinesthetic learners, very hands-on. Because even as it relates to identifying gifted kids, especially with our Black boys, we identify them differently.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and so do you think your learning style had an effect on your like or dislike, should I say, in terms of education up through college?
I think probably I had some level of giftedness.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that curiosity and the way I was interested in things that probably most young kids
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't be. And so, yeah, that's a great point.
Mm-hmm.
Differentiation, individualized
Mm-hmm.
learning, that was definitely not a thing when I was in high school. That wasn't even
Mm-hmm.
a focus. And so I lacked that. And then with the lack of representation, I think the two
That's
combined, it was like, I don't know,
mm-hmm.
chance. But I did get a great education. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
in that sense, but there was sacrifices that were made for that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because that's huge, and that's something that people are looking at now. And I think whereas you have um, some kids, especially our Black boys, they may be smart, but they don't understand truly how it is that they learn. And there's a difference in being smart. And so, elementary, middle school, even high school, you can make the grade because you're smart.
Mhm.
Okay, but truly learning what happens when you get to that place? And I would say, I was one of those kids, and I would say that I probably really didn't truly begin the art of learning until I understood how it was that I learned. And that was in my master's program. I think I was a smart kid that kind of got through and got by, and I was able to make the grades that were necessary to get me to the next level. But it was truly in my master's program that I really began to understand, when I started to do a deeper dive into the brain and learning and understanding what it meant at that point to learn, and the differentiation in terms of learning styles and stuff like that or whatever. And I was able to reflect back on, especially like in my elementary program. And I go back to Miss Adams all the time because, of course, I look at the differentiation that she had in how she taught different things to us. And although I didn't understand it then, knowing what I know now, that's why I know she was a master teacher, because she was able to tap into our brains and our learning styles in such a manner that brought out the best in us.
Yeah. I think that's what my doctoral research looked at the lives of Black women who taught between 1954 and 1971 in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. And 1954 is significant because of Brown v. Board, as we know. And then 71 is significant because Hattiesburg didn't desegregate their schools until 1971. So you have all of those years where there were, violent and extreme acts that were happening to try to stave off schools integrating. And so I was really interested in, when I stepped out of the classroom because of COVID, I decided to pursue my doctorate. And what I wanted to know was, we hear about like, where are all the Black educators and representation matters? And you were seeing all these school districts, at least in Missouri, where I'm currently at, put out statements about how much they valued Black and brown educators. And I was like, not in my experience. And I wanted to understand kind of that history and to see if there was a connection to Brown. And so Hattiesburg is an interesting place because it was an anomaly in the sense that Black educators were very, very well educated. I interviewed almost 30 people, and I would say 95% of the women I interviewed had master's degrees, which for that time, Jim Crow South, and you have a master's, that was a phenomenal feat. But just being connected to them and hearing their stories and what they did in the classroom, I was like, they were doing culturally responsive teaching, trauma-informed teaching, all of it before it had a name.
Right.
So, yeah.
That's important. That's important. And that's your historian part coming out. Bringing in the narratives and making the connections between the past and the present, and then hopefully now the future of people being able to use that same type of information. The learning, maybe some of the things that we're learning is different, but a lot of it is still the same. A lot of it's still the same. And a lot of the things that are relevant could still be taught the same way.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, hearing their narratives, I think really that was life-changing for me. Because when you're in your teaching program, they don't really talk about the history of education. So I didn't even get access to that history. And so to get it firsthand from the women who, in my mind, were really just forging the path for those of us who are educators now, it was so important and valuable to hear their stories and witness what they went through to fight for equity in education and in community. Yeah, they were real life heroes. It just was it made me feel hopeful and inspired. And I think if more people knew about those stories and brought them into the classroom, we might see more Black and brown educators in K-12 education, which would be a great thing.
If they knew the importance of why we're teaching. Gotcha.
Yeah. Yep. That part.
Because we certainly need more educators across the board, period. But we definitely need more Black and brown, especially males. One of the things, we talk about in terms of representation, when you have young Black boys who are capable and very smart, yet they're sitting in a calculus class or they're sitting in an advanced class, an AP class, and they don't have someone that look like them that they can relate to, that can help them to understand, hey, guess what? You can get to where you want to go. Because look at me, I'm here. But when you don't see that representation, and not that there's no honor in being a bus driver or being a custodian, but if that's the only representation that you see in an education system, what is that saying about our systems? And we really have to look at what we're doing. Representation matters.
But also, we have to improve our salaries, because if men are going to be in that profession, it's hard to take care of a family with those type of salaries. It changes the type of lifestyle that you have unless you get creative in how you do so. So we have to also then show them ways to be creative and to garner revenue in different ways so that they can still show up in the classroom and still show up at home for their families too.
And that's why when we talk about elections and voting and things like that, those things matter. Elections have consequences. Voting definitely has consequences, because when we look at what our funding is spent on, we look at the budgets and things of that nature, the education budget is truly the first to go, unfortunately.
Unfortunately.
And yeah, I mean, that's one of the first things to get cut. But I also feel like it's probably cut because people do recognize that there are folks in education because it's a calling. And so sometimes you find yourself doing things like going to the teacher store and buying extra supplies for your kids using your own money, because that's your calling. You want to do whatever it takes to educate your kids so that they actually get it. Okay. But we have to make sure that we are putting the funding, we're putting the people in place that supports education, that is truly going to put the dollars behind the work that's being done.
That is key. There was so many years that I was in education that I just did it because, like what you said, the love. And I would tell people, I'm here for the outcome, not the income. That was my words. I was always telling people, I'm here for the outcome, not the income. I'm here for the outcome, not the income. But you realize too that life still happens and you still need income. And so for people to have that good balance, we do need our laws to support our teachers. We do need people to support those who is the foundation of every single job that you have. Every single job that you have is the foundation is education. So we spend a lot of time here at this table talking about education, the importance of education, and supporting our educators out there, because it is a thankless job in many ways, but it's also not, because you see the benefits from the children and how they really thrive. And we always talk about years later how we have these people to come back and talk to us. And I'm just on campus today bumping, earlier. They're shocked to see us on the weekends sometimes when they bump into us, and just all kinds of things that happen that they're like, you're real people, and you just never notice until much later sometimes the impact that you have on your students. And representation absolutely matters. So showing up anyway in those spaces, even when we're not at our best, sometimes it helps to normalize for them that we're not robots, that we are people, that we have feelings. It's not our emotions that get us in trouble, but what we do with them. And so I'm still excited, Marley. I can't wait to hear more. Tell us something that we can find in your book. So we've heard some of these historical aspects. Even tell us the title of your book.
Oh, yeah, the title is good. So the title, and go back to my literary root, is from a Gwendolyn Brooks poem. And it's such a powerful, I think there's 3 lines, and it says, we are each other's harvest. We are each other's business. We are each other's magnitude and bond. And it was like, yes, especially I think in this moment that, I don't know, it just, I think captures this idea of humanity. And really the biggest lesson I think I gained from the women I interviewed was this idea of like collective effort, coalitions, learning about like SNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and the way
Mm-hmm.
in which they mobilized and organized and did the most incredible work. And it was collectively and led by local, everyday Black people who just said, yeah, we're changing the narrative. Dr. Ladner talks a lot about her generation, which she coined the Emmett Till generation, and just deciding that we have to do better. There was a calling and an understanding of we are going to change the way this looks. And so that title to me kind of embodies what people who were in the movement fought for and worked for really their entire lives.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us how you envision your book being implemented in schools, like
Yeah, I think
where it fits into it.
I envisioned it originally, I thought for teachers or pre-service teachers. I think teacher prep programs, we don't talk enough about. How do we improve teacher prep programs and prepare teachers to step into classrooms so that we can think about retention and kind of mitigating racial battle fatigue and just some of the issues that we see today. And so originally that was my thinking. And then it kind of expanded, and I feel like it's a book that could be used in any space, a nonprofit, a DEI department. There's a part for pre service teachers at the end of every chapter. I worked kind of collaboratively throughout the book. So there's lesson plans, there's a framework for how do you know that you're planning and assessing curricula, you're bringing it into the classroom and it's good for your students. I think that's the biggest thing, right? Most teachers will say,
Mm-hmm.
I want to be culturally responsive, but I don't really know what that means. So
Mm-hmm.
my goal was to create a book with lots of resources to actually help that implementation piece.
Mm-hmm.
When we think about like teachers pay teachers, and now with AI, we have Magic Classroom. I don't know if y'all have seen that, but that's terrifying. And within seconds, you can have a whole unit, right? You type in, like, I want a unit about the civil rights movement. And it's like, I mean, really, go to Magic Classroom. It's wild. But I think the scary thing about those things, if you don't know that history, how do you know you're bringing in something that's credible, that's accurate to your students? And so I wanted
Mm-hmm.
something that helped kind of be a blueprint and a guide for that task as well.
Mm-hmm. That's a trust but verify situation. You've definitely got to check it out.
But let's be honest, a lot of teachers don't, right? They're teaching multiple preps. They're tired. They're like, I got 5 preps. Let me just
Mm-hmm.
teachers pay teachers is really, really terrifying to go in and assess. And you look at the ratings, you're like, ooh, let me look at this. This has 5 stars and it's a unit about Black history or Asian American history. And when you start looking at it, it's like, oh yeah, we can't have our young people learning misinformation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
How do we then give educators a resource to begin to understand when they don't have the time, when we know educators are taxed and tired and they got a whole lot on their plates?
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of states are mandating now culturally responsive standards. And so it's like one more thing. And I wanted to create something that didn't feel like one more thing, but instead felt like, okay, I can figure this out and find some ways to do it
Mm-hmm.
the right way.
Mm-hmm. And so what types of support pieces are in place in your book that someone would take a look at and kind of walk away with some tools? What are some tools that are there?
Sure. Yeah. There's a framework to kind of guide what does a lesson need to be culturally responsive and inclusive.
Mm-hmm.
That framework can be used to assess text, right? Because when we talk about representation, we also have to think about the textbooks that we bring into the
Mm-hmm.
classroom and expose our students to. Lesson plans. So instead of going to Teachers Pay Teachers, there's lesson plans from elementary to college that are in the book. And also there's resources like, where are some credible places? If I'm not going to go to Teachers Pay Teachers, where can I go to learn about the movement or whatever aspects of history it is? And we have places like Facing History and incredible Learning for Justice. And so I'm always amazed that more teachers aren't aware of some of those sites that are reputable and where
Mm-hmm.
you can go and have free online learning with webinars and download lessons, but I don't know that they're utilized. So there's also kind of a directory for that. And then one of the chapters was written primarily by my former students because we talk a lot about centering student voices, but I really wanted like let's hear from students. What do they need and want in their space? And so
Mm-hmm.
their guidance, I think, is really, really powerful.
Mm-hmm. And that's an important piece when you sit back and you think, listening to the people that you're teaching, it's almost like a speaker. You have to be able to read the room. And that's the same thing
You
as an
better.
educator. Yeah, exactly. You've got to be able to read the room in your classroom. If you're sitting there talking about the Pythagorean theorem and the students are sitting there lost and you can see it in their face, you just can't continue to keep your foot on the gas. You've got to be able to pull back and make sure that they understand what's going on. And that's why you have to have those healthy check-ins. But here's the gotcha. You have to be able to make your students feel comfortable enough that it's okay for them to say, I don't know and I don't understand. And that's a piece. And I think that's where you get into the cultural sensitivity, because for some students, the thought of being able to come out and say those types of things, may put them in a place of feeling inferior, depending upon how it's presented to them and the space in which they are made to feel comfortable, to be able to ask for help, to ask for assistance, especially when you're talking about in some of these urban areas.
Yeah, I think that's where that relationship piece is so important. And we know the role of mentoring and building relationships with students is
Mm-hmm.
so critical and I think underutilized in a lot of ways. But I think that relationship piece is key to all of it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it starts at the top. I always tell folks it's the tone at the top that's really going to set the stage for success. If you don't have administrators, if you don't have school board members, you don't have the right people on the team, guess what? That tone at the top is not going to trickle down to your students who are your customers. That's your customer base. And you have to make sure that everybody is hearing the same message, that guess what? We want to make sure that our students know that we care, we hear, and we want to make them the best, that they can possibly be. And we want to pull out the best in them. And oftentimes, unfortunately, students are made to feel judged. Their parents are made to feel judged because some of their parents were traumatized by their school experience. And so they come to a situation whereby they are not wanting to come to the school, participate in the PTA meetings, the parent conferences and stuff like that because of their types of, interactions as a child when they were growing up. And so we have to be able to, one, deal with those things that the parents are dealing with so that they feel welcome coming into the school, so that they can be more engaged in the lives of their children's education. And so then now you have a situation where you've engaged the parent, you've basically torn down those barriers and those walls that have existed, because in a lot of situations, the cultural bias that has occurred in their situations, but now their kids are in your classroom, and their kids are coming into the school system and stuff like that or whatever. And so we have to figure out, how do we build these bridges so that our students feel free, that they can sit down and be themselves and talk about the challenges that they have in terms of understanding something, because I know one of the things we talk about is always making sure our kids, we want to make sure it is what they know and understand and can do, and that's the big piece. And so a part of that is them feeling comfortable enough to tell you where they are falling in one of those three areas or lacking in one of those three areas.
I think it's the buy-in too, being able to show them why it is important. And I think that's the cultural piece that makes it more relevant too, is helping them to understand why they need to know this information, why it will be applicable and why it's important to them specifically, why it will make a difference. Because I think I didn't really understand the real true importance of education until I got to college.
Mhm.
I knew about getting grades. I knew you should get grades. You should do your homework. But understanding the real purpose of education and how you generalize the learning that you have, I didn't really get that true concept until I got to college. Why I should learn the information, and then also understanding that I don't need to know everything. So where I should put my focus, like I don't have to be good at everything. I only need to be good in the areas in which I am studying, or I need to focus on this specifically, or how this applies to me, and let them still do their thing over there. One doesn't have to necessarily trump the other, literally. So.
Mhm.
I learned those things in college, the balance and how to purposely procrastinate. Procrastinate is not necessarily a bad word. It's the concept, or it's where you're using that word specifically. So it's really ordering things in importance. I don't need to remember all the state capital names when I can look that up on a map. But I do need to understand and remember this for this test specifically. But then I also need to hold this into my long-term memory, because I'm going to need to use this again. So I really need to focus on this information, because this information in stats 1 is necessary to understand, because I got to take stats 2. And stats 2 is going to play off of stats 1. So helping the students just even understand where they should show up in this information and how it's going to be applicable to them long-term.
Well,
and that you're not going to always be entertained in class.
Right. But you talk about the relevance of information and what's being taught. And that's also significant as well, because like you said, knowing all of the states and capitals, and now you can look it up. But there was a time when the internet did not exist. So you had to know it. You understand? So that you can have a point of reference to begin to do some research, to do some data, analysis and stuff like that or whatever. So there were certain things you really had to understand. Because one of the things, I look at math, for example, being able to problem solve for X in algebra and things of that nature, whatever. And I would say, I can't honestly say anyone has ever asked me to solve a problem, a math problem. Now, I would never tell my algebra teacher that Miss Bryce, Sarah Jo Cherry Bryce. I
the
would
fact
never
that you
tell
remember
her
her name.
Exactly, because she was one of the best. She was a good teacher also, and she challenged us. Okay, but I would honestly tell Miss Bryce, I do more talking the way I did in class than I do solving math problems. However, what I have come to realize is that algebraic functions didn't necessarily mean that I was going to be solving a math problem. What it solved, it showed me how to isolate variables, okay,
And
in order to be able to problem solve philosophically. Even though I had to use that stuff in stats and research and stuff like that or whatever. So Miss Bryce, I did use my algebra, studying along the way. But it really taught me what it really meant to be able to isolate problems and variables in order to solve real life problems. If these certain things continue to happen and you're the constant in this, so what do? You remove that variable and see what happens. Okay. And sometimes you may realize, like I tell my clients, you might be the problem.
You are the problem. And some people will believe that you are the problem and the solution. So that will have you confused. They call you the problem and then they want you to come and solve it. And so it's a lot to that. In algebra, it shows you also that you have to trust the process and you have to work the process, and that you're not going to get the answer unless you go. There's no shortcuts to that. In order to get the right answer, there is a right answer and there's a wrong way to do it as well. And so it does teach you the patience of that, and then paying attention to details, negatives and positives. That changes the whole answer based on those small little things. So I think learning why you're learning also is important. So you may never been asked what's X
right
at this point, but being able to work that process, being able to isolate, like you said, being able to have the conversations, being able to take in all the different variables and understand what's important for this math problem or life problem and what is not. What is just fluff? What is just extraness? What do I need to eliminate in order to multiply? And then when even simplifying things is important. Sometimes
Yes.
understanding like it doesn't have to be that complicated. We can simplify things. So definitely great life lessons happen in math. I loved math growing up, as you can tell.
I see. Math
I
was not
love
my
math.
thing.
I love math, but I see in life how math is not always mathing. And when things don't always add up, it makes me want to go back to the original equation and figure out where did we go wrong? What happened here? What steps? So it also teaches us about you not skipping the steps. When people skip steps, they tend to trip and fall.
Yeah. Very, very true. Well, let me ask you this, and I would say Dr. Bunch because you are Dr. Bunch. I don't know if we've said that just yet. So, but let me ask you, if you could talk to your 14-year-old self sitting in a classroom, knowing all of what you know now, the experiences that you've had, and even as you are now an educator yourself, what would you tell your 14-year-old self?
Oh, wow. That's always such a hard question, but such a good one. I would tell my 14-year-old self that
Your hair
despite
is cool.
I'm glad you named that because that actually was such a thing. That was such a thing, right? We don't even think about like when we're in our own spaces, it's just like, oh, this is who I am and something I love. But that was such a point of shame and I would say contention growing up. My hair was absolutely like, oh. But I would tell my 14-year-old self, yes, your hair is cool, the bigger the better. And someday you're going to use all of these experiences as a student to help other students. And that, yeah, that's just been, I mean, it sounds so cliche, but that's really been other than being a mother, that's been the most important part of my life is working with my students. And so I wish I would have known then that even the hard parts of growing up and going through schooling that was not necessarily ideal for me taught me something I needed to know and carry into the future to be a better educator. And that lesson has been, I think, invaluable to my own growth as a teacher. So I wouldn't
You can relate to them. You can relate to them in a different way. When you see someone struggling to be seen, or you see someone who might be miseducated or misinterpreted in some type of way, then you have that compassion, that empathy to jump in there and say, I remember when.
And
Yeah.
I would often say to them, I see you. And it's like just those 3 words, right? Of saying to somebody like, I see you. It was like,
Yeah.
yeah, that's such a powerful phrase. Yeah.
Yeah. That's amazing, and it's it's so much that can happen when people see you and they recognize you know that's huge. That says a whole lot, especially about a kid who may be going through some challenges and fighting battles that they have not even shared with us. But the fact that someone takes the time to spend a little time to even say I see you makes a huge difference. It really does.
And not only I see you, but I expect more from you. And
Yes.
I expect the best from you. And
Yes.
I see greatness in you. And I think that's the part of what keeps me signing my contract is I get to see people who look like me and I get to tell them that they are great. Not you're going to become great. You are already great.
And I
And then
love
I
that you
expect
mentioned,
that greatness in you.
yes, I love that you mentioned that expectation component because I think sometimes in spaces, educators think, I'm going to help you out and I'm going to lower this bar. And it's like, no, no, we are capable, students are capable, and often rise to the occasion. I would actually say
Mm-hmm.
most often, right? You set the bar
Mm-hmm.
and people meet it. And so
They will meet your expectations. And research
Mm-hmm.
shows us that if we don't expect much from our students, that's exactly what we will get, not much. And so
Mm-hmm.
I love looking at people and expecting more from them than they expect from themselves. And that's what good teachers and mentors do. They see that in you. Your friends love you just the way you are, but your mentors love you too much to leave you where you are. And that's what good mentorship does. It sees it. I see you. And not only just I see you, you get to tell people the other good 3 words. You are enough.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh,
yes.
y'all are going somewhere with this one. I tell you.
But we can't go far because it's time to wrap this puppy up.
Those affirmations are so good.
Yes.
Well,
That's why I said it's not what people call you, it's what you answer to. And you have to make sure you speak to yourself so you know what you should be called.
That's right.
Yeah.
That is exactly right. You have to speak life over yourself, and that's truly important. So, but I tell you, I've enjoyed this conversation. I've enjoyed this time at the table, and that French toast. When I tell y'all that French toast was,
We heard you smacking.
Well, I'll say this. Thank you once again for joining us right here at the table for Sunday Brunch. I am Dr. Richard Mason.
I am Dr. Tamara Williams.
And we will see you next week right back here at WHOB Smooth 88.1 FM.
The essence of HU.
Keep your fork.
Someday we'll be able to measure the power of words. I think they are things. I think they get on the walls. They get in your wallpaper. They get in your rugs, in your upholstery, in your clothes, and finally into you.
Thank you for joining us at the table.
Tune in next Sunday at 1 p.m. for more delicious topical recipes for life on the Sunday Brunch.
On Smooth 88.1 WHOV.